Welcome to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated to discussing women's unique challenges in the tech industry. I'm your host, Limor Bergman-Gross, and today I have the pleasure speaking with Vidhya Narayanan. Vidhya is an engineering director of Google, and she didn't start out in tech. She actually wanted to become a doctor, but life had other plans. And now she's making big waves in the tech world. We're going to chat about her unexpected path into tech, how she's shaking up leadership, sparking innovation, and pushing for diversity at Google. Whether you're looking to climb the ladder or just love a good success story, you're going to want to hear this. Let's dive in. Hi, Vidhya. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hey, Limor, thank you so much for the opportunity too.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. And for those of you who don't know, me and Vidhya have a history together. We used to work together at Sun Microsystems like ages ago.
I know when you reached out and I'm like, I know this person. It was nice to catch up a bit on like our time intersection there. It's just a long time ago.
It is. I will not say how long ago, so we don't expose too much
Yes,
information.
we don't want to age ourselves here with the audience for sure. But great to
Yeah.
meet you again.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Great to meet you again. And maybe start by sharing a little bit, Vidya, about your background and how you even got into software engineering.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of an accident, I have to say. Growing up, I always wanted to be a doctor. I think my path was reasonably set growing up in India and very kind of a traditional Southeast. And if you studied any better, your path was set for you, either become a doctor or an engineer. Doctor passion was always there, something that I wanted to do, but I couldn't make it into the schools that I wanted. And I didn't feel dental was an option that I wanted to pursue, which was the kind of schools that I was getting admission to. Accidentally went into engineering and kind of loved it since then, and I have pursued that with higher education and things. So that's kind of how I landed here.
This is funny because it reminds me of one of my guests who told me that accidentally she went, there was like an open house kind of day, and accidentally she went into the engineering room. So that's incredible. That's
Yeah, I know.
incredible.
I know. I know. This is not a very uncommon story, turns out, in industry, especially like I see so many people with varied background come and thrive. And I think that's what makes it a very interesting place when you bring those perspectives of people who are chemical engineers or even non-engineers, people who just pursued music and were in like bands and stuff come and work with you in different places. And it's just really fascinating to bring, kind of amalgamation of all those intersection of like ideas and talents is just fascinating.
Yes, indeed. And also, I want to highlight here that it's important to know that you don't have to be born with the keyboard in your hand, right? I mean, you can
Yes.
shift to tech.
Well, it'll be nice if there was a keyboard. Seemed like that's what, most of the kids these days do. But I agree with you. I think if you put your head into it and pursue your passion, you can pretty much do most of what you want.
Absolutely. And share a little bit how you got into leadership because you have a very impressive career.
Oh, thank you, Limor. I think I wouldn't say that was accidental. I think I spent a good 10-year plus as a software engineer, growing in the ranks, right? Being a TL and all that. And you talked about Sun, right? Like it was it at Sun that I made the transition from the engineering ladder to kind of the management ladder. I still vividly remember having this conversation with my manager at the time, like, I want to pursue this. And they were like, you are a good engineer. Wouldn't you want to stick in the individual career path, become an architect? You have all the potential to get there. And I really liked the ability to influence business as a technical person, and being able to capitalize the team that I was working with to land like bigger impact was just fascinating for me. I naturally gravitated on coaching, mentoring, like being there for people, like seeing them thrive along with me. And I kind of was naturally interested in those aspects. So I kind of asked for it, and I never looked back. I've really enjoyed the journey of growing in that management side and taking more and more responsibilities and teams. So that's kind of how I grew.
Yeah, and actually, I can relate because I also became a manager when I was working at Sun, and also my manager, at least one of them, kind of late. They thought I should be, I was a staff engineer, and they thought I should, continue that path. And I said, no, that's not what I want.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great to be in places where you have those paths set out for you, right? Not every company and it kind of forces some people to have to switch into the management path because that's the only place you could grow. Where you have that parallel tracks, it's really kind of brings the folks who are passionate and want to do really be in a leadership role. And I think it's something that not everybody likes it.
Yes,
So, being able to be there and being able to pursue that, I think it's a privilege.
absolutely. And I think that when we worked at Sun, it wasn't that common to have an IC track. And now I think many companies had it. So you don't
Yeah.
have to grow as a manager. And how did you get to executive roles? What's your secret?
I think it was when I will say that just generally in my career, I went for opportunities that gave a little bit of churn in the stomach. So if it was just easy to do, that opportunity, I get bored. Like I personally just get bored. Stuff is like if I get bored with stuff, I just don't stay bored. I just go find something else to do that is a little bit more unboring and gets me excited to get out of bed and do job, right? Like I totally believe in work life intersection, not a lot of work life boundaries. So I think a little bit of what work defines who I am as a person as well. So having that place at work where I spend majority of my good time of the day and being able to learn and continue to contribute is critical. So I think going for those opportunities did well for me. I was also grateful for extending opportunities at Sun. I did one of the very startup-y type efforts, um, building something that was like out there, right? But being able to take that risk, I did that because it was an opportunity for me to build a little startup environment in a well funded place. Once I did that, when I went out of Sun looking for opportunities, the Intel job came along. And there again, I've never built on AWS Cloud. I've never built that kind of platform on media entertainment industry was new, a lot of new things, but I know I can do it because I had the muscle memory of like starting from nothing to go somewhere at a smaller scale. So I've kind of rinsed and repeated that across my career in different places. And I think that really led me to land, be visible, have more bigger opportunities where you start getting seat at the table, and naturally it kind of lands you into the exec path. Um,
Yes, so always saying yes to opportunities and always be willing to take a leap, right? To do
yeah,
something
right,
you don't know.
right, right, exactly.
What have been your experiences being a woman, also, a woman of color in a very male dominant field?
Yeah, I don't think I had that even as a top of mind in my early part of the career. I think at some point in the executive rank is where I started realizing that um, the subtle kind of questions and the comments that come kind of made me wonder, like, would you have asked this question if you really had another male counterpart part in the same situations? Like one time somebody asked me, like, did you ever code? Like, how would you become a director of engineering in a place if you never code in your life, right? Like, you get questions like that in a very subtle way, and that's just someone, you look at them and it's like that's just growth opportunity for you as a VP in an organization to know how to have these conversations in a more inclusive,
Yeah.
non-biasy way is how I rationalize those conversations. But beyond that, I think there is also an opportunity, right? Like I think when I show up, I think the expectations are low in the room. I've noticed that more than once. And, I always over exceed them. It's like, why not, right? Like, keep your expectations low. I'll blow you away is the takeaway that I come back with. It's not necessarily true. I think after a point in the career, I think there is a lot more top of mind. There is a lot more industry awareness on equality and DEI and people of color and different cultural backgrounds and things like that. I'm also grateful to work in a place where I don't get that feel on a day-to-day basis. But I agree with you. I think it's part recognizing where you stand and being able to work through that. It's part giving that back, right? Like, now that you have gone through that experience, how can you make sure that it doesn't happen in the workplace as a leader? And how can you create a more inclusive environment?
Definitely, yes. Create a more inclusive environment and support others. And how did you face, if you have any tips, like for women facing those kind of comments? They have a name, by the way, microaggressions. They're not so micro, though.
Yeah, I think speak up in a more, not a defensive way, but in a more positive way. It's very hard to speak up for yourself. I think I really extend that hand where I spot it, like I call it out. I think that's important as a leader to kind of make sure that you call those behaviors out so it's visible for folks. Um, but also, if you are repeated for environments like that put you in a place where you have to go through it. I mean, at some point you have to say, like, is it worth it? What are you working towards, right? And more than once I have gone after opportunities, not because of these particular situations, but change has been rewarding for me in my career in so many different ways. So don't afraid to make that change. Nobody needs to be treated to anything. There's so many opportunities out there. Just go explore, right?
Definitely, definitely don't stay in a in a place that you don't feel supported, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, like being asked, have you coded as a director of engineering? And I wanted to ask you another question related to that. Many women that I coach struggle with how technical they need to stay as they grow into leadership,
Yeah.
or they have a fear that if they grow into a leadership role or even a director or VP, they will lose the touch, like from the technology. So, what's your point of view on that?
Yeah, I think just the leaving aside the perception, which is where my comment came from, right? And I think that kind of induces a little bit of fear in the women is like, so if I grew up too much, how well? I mean, we are perfectionists, right, as women. And I think there are significant differences in how we think about ourselves in terms of what is okay, not okay versus what is actually needed, right? I often put myself if there was a male in this particular situation, how would they be navigating the scenario? And I navigate my scenarios kind of playing myself in those roles. And sometimes I get clarity that way. So leaving that aside, just you bring up a really good point, right? Like, I think for anybody, male or woman, as long as you're in an engineering function, tech industry, you have to stay current and technical. And I'm a firm believer of that. I walked into Google as a site reliability engineering director, and we have a very specific way of where we are onboarded, and I started spend the first few months and weeks just actually writing code, acting as an individual contributor. It's really important to understand the people you're managing and what they are going through. Because at the end of the day, you should be able to step in anyone's roles to an extent and be able to care for the organization, right? Like, it helps to build trust with your team if you show up in that way, right? If you connect to their day to day of what they are doing, that's the only way you can get that trust. And once you have that trust with your team on in terms of like where they see you and where you see them, magic happens, right? And at the end of the day, and this is one of the topics we wanted to discuss is like, how do you blend the technology with with the business, right? Like, how can you be a business leader and paving out the strategy for the business if you don't understand the capabilities of what the technology could do and marry them together, right? So I think, at least in that aspect, there is a staying technical. It doesn't necessarily mean staying coding. Like, if you are spending all your time coding day in and day out, and you're acting as one of your individual contributors, it's going to limit where you're spending your cycles, right? So it is the balance of what level of technical input and technical insight is needed for the organization, and how do you stay in that bridge, being able to know enough to create that influential ideas and be part of the conversation on your business and shaping the strategy is very critical. Does it make sense? Am I answering what you're
It
asking?
makes total
More?
sense. It makes
Yeah.
total sense, Vidya. And I can share that every new role that I took, I spent time with the engineers, with the architects. I wasn't writing code, but I was diving into the architecture, really trying to understand. I was learning a lot about the technology because I moved from different companies doing totally different things, like you did, right?
Yeah.
So every time I had to learn something new, whether it was virtualization or cloud, or I worked at storage, so I learned deduplication. So really, understanding what the company does, understanding like the technology.
Yeah, that's absolutely critical, right? Some of the best advices I got in my early days at Google, we built a lot of our tech ourselves. So knowing enough of each of that just takes time, right? Um, you know, it's okay to ask stupid questions. It's okay to ask people to help you, right? Some of the best advice I was going to say is, go find the TLs in the space and please request them to give you 30 minutes of their time in front of the whiteboard. My God, magic happens. There is no equivalent of reading enough number of documents or staring through the code. You will never get that. Most of them go stale, the documentation and stuff, anyways. But being able to just do that and being able to, like, it A, builds relationship, B, they know you want to learn, and C, they like to teach. So I think it's a happy situation on everyone. That's great, Limor. What you said is, like, you have to deep dive, deeply understand the architecture and some of the context of where the architecture comes from. Then you can think through limitations. Then you can think through how to, you know, blend that and make that shape that in a long lasting kind of the long arc technology, or
Yeah.
roadmap and stuff comes from that foundation.
Love it, love it, love it. And also, yes, whiteboarding is a great way. I'm a very visual person. So for me,
Yes.
like do diagrams, that works the best.
Yeah.
And you build trust. You
Yeah.
build trust with the team because
Yeah.
they get the stage. They love, as you said, they love sharing how much they know. You ask them questions. So by the questions that you ask, they see that you're not completely disconnected, right? That you know something, you know a thing or two.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. And let's kind of talk about the harmony between technology and business, right? How do you do that? Because we know, based on our experience at Sun, that was a great company, incredible technologies, right? And we did incredible stuff there, but business wise, wasn't very successful. So, how do you keep that harmony between technology and business?
Yeah, I think where you realize I mean, you use the word harmony, which is very powerful, right? I think, let's look at, I think a little bit of imbalance is really where magic happens. But I think as a leader, bringing that harmony back is really, really critical, right? Like, so one grows further than the other is actually a good thing, right? So if your business is pulling your technology along or the vice versa, then you're actually staying more on the, innovative side of where you should be pushing the boundaries a bit. So I think that's a good thing. Like AI, right? Like, how can you have a conversation these days without talking about it, right? Like, it's just fascinating. You look at the pace of the growth, especially on the technology front, of where AI is heading. And if you look at kind of the past scale of like internet revolution or the smartphone revolution, like this is a completely different, even faster growth than what we saw in those transformations, right? But then AI has been around for what, like 7 decades plus, right? Why does, a small open AI company launches something, and then I still vividly remember my son coming home from school. It's like, Mom, we were playing around with this thing, called like open, the chat GPT, whatever. And it's like, oh, it gives me good answers. Everybody's starting to do their homework, and like we were playing around with it. It's the kid who played around with like a lot of your, audio assistant, right? Like at home and things like this. So this was another thing, but like revolutionizing thing. And it's like, see what happened as soon as a small, business opportunity was presented, and it kind of exploded in terms of adoption, and the scale of business opportunities is touching across every industry, right? Mining, fashion, insurance, health, you pick any place. It's amazing to see the transformation that the technology is doing to businesses and the kind of things that we are seeing. I mean, we're yet to see the big business landings on it, but it's that a little bit of one leapfrogs the other is actually a good thing to pull and push and kind of see it. So that harmony that you talked about is really crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, from my experience, always trying to see where technology serves the business,
Right.
and vice versa, like which technology, like when you want to make a business leap, how technology can help you, and not thinking about technology just in a sense of, oh, this is cool, let's do it, because this is what engineers typically want to do. I mean, based on my experience, they want to
Yes.
experiment new things. And I made several mistakes in my career, like going with their enthusiasm and like, oh yeah, cool, let's do it. But it wasn't necessarily a good business decision. There wasn't like a link to, okay, how is it helping the business? So always there has to be, it has to serve something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have done equally my share of mistakes too, right? Like which has been exceptionally costly as well, right? It's not just small mistakes at smaller scale, which has smaller, it has some profound impact. Like if I can uh, share a story, my prior work, like, this thing you're talking about, like the ROI of having the technology or the engineering cost structure matching with where your business needs to go is crucial, right? Like when you have a much more of a imbalanced cost structure where you're growing too fast, you're in the innovation spirit, but you're not keeping tap of where the business is growing. Our business wasn't growing that much, and we were continuing to grow the engineering function, continue to throw new features, functionality, this and that, reinventing the platform. This was cool, that was cool, make this perfect, make that, like, but for what? To serve what purpose?
Yeah.
Where is the money coming from to fund that, engineering function? Like it's critical, right? Like we went into a major reduction in force. It was significant, go to kind of go through that, and that was a huge learning, and I'm always keeping that in my top of mind as I think about like where do you invest. Like every manager, we all have fiduciary responsibility to our companies, right? Like even if I didn't have a big P&L to own as a manager, I need to understand the cost structure, I need to understand where the business needs are to match that up. So being able to respect that and navigate that is significant and crucial. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm sure everybody makes mistakes, but
Everybody.
how can you make less and less mistakes by learning? Taking that learning back is crucial.
Yeah, I can share that one of my learnings is that don't focus too much on making your engineers happy. So, yes, I want them to be happy, but sometimes I wanted them to be happy more than you needed.
Right,
So,
right.
sometimes they want to do something that is cool, but it doesn't serve a purpose. So always ask, like, what purpose does it serve? Are we doing it just because it's cool? Because people are excited about it? Because I want my team to be happy? or it actually makes sense?
Yeah, I think the happiness part you're bringing up is another good thing, right? Like I think happiness, what you're reflecting is like, is the engineering team, is the morale high? Are they continuing to learn? Right? Like I use this term tools in the tool chest quite a bit with my engineering teams, right? I think it's important to add new tools to your tool chest, right? Like, so for example, now some of the things I am working with my engineers on, like what can we capitalize on what AI and the tool set could offer? We look at very large scale systems, distributed systems. There is a method to the madness that we have built in terms of tools and technology we have deployed. What should we do more, right? Like, if you ask the question about how would the system be self-healing, more from a cost vector, right? Like we could put more engineers and take off some of the mundane tasks out of the equation and have technology and automation. And we do a lot of that at work. But how do you use the next set of tools to fast track that? Like what's cheaper, what's more efficient, what's more sustaining, so you don't have to keep watering this, right? You can be done and move on to the next stuff. Those things, when you present them in the right way, I think engineers get excited to be on the learning curve. When you are on the learning curve, like can you bring that back, that learning, and put them to use in the specific problem set that furthers us as a business, not so much as just as a parallel track just goes on its own, playing around. Like there has to be a balance between play and work. And I think that's what you're saying about the happiness arm. But I think that is a great to kind of merge them and bring them together.
Yes, definitely. And engineers really like when they know that what they do serve a purpose. So when they
Right,
understand the linkage between the work that they are doing and the impact, that
right.
really helps with their motivation, with their feel of, okay, I'm doing something that serves something, serve a purpose.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned AI. I just wanted to ask you if you or anyone that you know really fears AI in a sense, like, because I hear a lot of people say, oh, AI will take jobs, will need less developers, and so forth. So do you sense that either personally or, people in your network?
Oh, I mean, all the time. Even high schoolers. I have a senior at home. His friends are getting college admissions. Like, oh, I applied for computer science. I don't think I'll have relevancy when I graduate out. I'm like, my God, you guys are so young. You should be focused on learning. Why are you worried about and talking about it in that regard, right? Like, I mean, it's not the first time we feel that way. Like Ramar, like you and I have, like we talked about, we are aging ourselves here in some sense. This is not the first time. Like cloud felt that way, smartphone revolution felt that way. Like every time there is, I think there will be more other useful things. Human beings and our creativity will be using that. And at the minimal, I can see AI taking a lot of the mundane stuff out of the equation. So that just think about where else we could be spending our time doing like innovative, useful things. And I think it's an opportunity space. I'm actually excited about it, not threatened
Yeah.
by any means. And it's all those humans making AI possible anyways. I think it's the application of them, that technology into the various businesses, and how do we transform, you know, eh, across the board humanity and elevate ourselves in the next place. It's a fascinating journey, I think.
I'm with you. I'm excited about it. And I think that it will make actually being a software engineer much cooler because all the manual stuff, all the maintenance stuff, we'll just let the machine do.
Yes,
We'll do all the
yes.
innovative and fun stuff.
Yeah. What if your code can be just like documented as you just write? Right? Like, who likes to do that, right? Like, your manuals, your playbooks, if they can be auto created based on watching, how your, folks are actually addressing issues and outages and things like that. It's just like so many things AI
Yeah.
can solve
Generate all
for
the test
us
cases for
are
me.
mundane. Yes, test cases are phenomenal things, right? Like code reviews, the amount of innovation that's happening in just the developer AI productivity space is just fascinating when people are actually finding value, right? Like this assistant that can just help you across the board for a software engineer, like you said, is just great, right? Like embrace them, take help. Because you
Absolutely.
are even more valuable to do other things.
Definitely. Always embrace technology and embrace things and see how you can grow. And thank you so much, Vidya, for being here. And before we leave, how can people find you?
Oh, I have a LinkedIn profile. I go by
Perfect.
Sri Vidhya Narayanan. So it's not Vidya you find me, but Sribidhya
Yeah, I'll share the
Narayanan.
link.
So yeah, I have the LinkedIn profile. That's usually the best way to get in touch with me. Um, you know, who remembers phone numbers or anything else these days?
No
Maybe
one.
at some point you can ask AI, like, get me in touch with Vidya, and there will telepathic way of getting in touch with you or something. It was a pleasure to Limor. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for suggesting some of these topics. It gave me good opportunities to think through and have this conversation. So I
Absolutely.
enjoyed your other podcasts as well. So thanks for doing this to women and the industry as a whole. So I really appreciate what you are pursuing as well.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. I really enjoy doing that. And thank you so much for spending this time with me and with our audience. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader. And next week, I'm going to talk with Purni Siddharth. Purni is a principal product manager, and she bravely transitioned from engineering to product management. You'll discover how she overcomes setbacks, built resiliency, and also found her true passion. So especially for women who consider a transition, whether it's from product to engineering or vice versa, this episode is for you.